welcome back to my friends online as well. Thank you for staying with us all the way. We want to say we haven't forgotten you. I want to say thank you for joining us here as we begin with the panel discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, this is of course our theme that you heard earlier on, reset or rebuild. Well, in the words of Mr. Gupta, it's a little bit of both. And thriving responsibly in a post-pandemic world. How do we do that? Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you're curious about this question, this topic, this theme, please send in your questions under the Q&A section, and our panel on stage will be trying their very best with the time given to answer as many as we can. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I'd like to welcome our very distinguished panel today. Our panel moderator, put your hands together to welcome Professor Annie Koh, Professor Emeritus of Finance from Lee Kuan Yew School of Business, Singapore Management University. A round of applause, Prof. Annie. Looking so good today. And of course, I'd like to, invite our panelists right now. Can I please have Mr. Jason Goh, Managing Director, Airport Operations Management, Changi Airport Group. A round of applause. Please welcome Mr. Kiran Kumar, Deputy Chief Executive, Infocom Media Development Authority. A round of applause, Mr. Kumar. And Ms. So Siu Chu, Group Head of Big Data, AI, Consumer Banking Technology, DBS. A round of applause. A very warm welcome, and of course have a lively discussion. Of course, over to you, Prof. Annie. Thank you for joining us here today.
Thank you very much, Surey. A very good morning to all of you. Now, I know I'm standing between you and lunch, but I'm going to tell you this is the highlight. Serious, of course. Minister Teo is not here. She was the highlight, okay? But now we are. Now, what I'm going to do is we are only given 45 minutes and not the original 60. So many of the questions which had been given to me will now be thrown out of the window, all right? For very simple reasons. I think we are all here because the last 18 months have created many changes in the ways we work, live, and play. And I cannot think of a better panel than the wonderful panel that I have right in front of me. So I thought we should really get to the theme, reset or rebuild. The model answer had been given. Piyush says it's reset and rebuild. But guess what? We will have to do it constantly. It's going to be reset and rebuild a few times before we finally say that we get there. Why? Because the road ahead is going to be a transition pathway. And I think Piyush mentioned that, and we did not compare notes. So what I hope to do is engage my on-site audience. Wonderful to see all of you. You look very good with masks on. I hope that you keep it on. But I'm very sure my audience of over 700, who are probably not technically, at the level that my panel is, would also want to know what is happening in the world of tech, what transition means for talent, and what does it mean to transform. So we are going to use human language today on this panel. And I thought a better way to get started is to have each one of them share a little bit as a leader in their organizations, even if they only joined the organization in January 2021. That would be Kiran. But as leaders in their organization, what have they seen, observed in that reset mode? So 18 months has gone by. And I thought it would be best to start with you, Kiran, because you kind of represent the government voice, all right, from the IMDA perspective. So what has changed tremendously? And Tech 3 is our forum. One of the big T is about trends. So maybe you could share that at the Singapore enterprises level.
Thank you so much, Annie. It's always a pleasure being on stage with you. Very good morning, very good afternoon to all of you. Many old friends in the room. SCS, congratulations, Yoksin and team, for this wonderful event. I think it is a very timely event. It is a very timely event just because of what Piyush was saying earlier. There are many tipping points hitting us at a rapid pace, pandemic aside. I'll talk about a couple of things in terms of what we are seeing from IMDA's vantage point, because we are responsible for driving the growth of the digital economy and driving the digital society as we march towards Singapore's digital future. I'll talk about one specific area, which is technology. Digitalization has been there for many years. It's not a new trend. At IMDA, we have been driving digitalization across sectors and across corporate segments. And a lot has been happening on a linear fashion since circa 2015. We've put in place many programs for SMEs to digitize. We've put in place programs for hawkers to go digital. We're working on seniors going digital. Let me give you the stats of what's happening in Singapore today. We run a digital acceleration index together with BCG to do an annual stocktake of where the Singapore economy is when it comes to digitalization. Point number one, we had been linear since 2018. It became exponential last year. Driven by COVID, it was a necessity and companies needed to react. Whether you are in the shipping industry, whether you're in the logistics sector, whether you're an F&B outlet. Exponential. Our programs and scheme take-ups were very high. We have touched 75,000 SMEs. Last year alone, 40,000 transactions of SMEs adopting digital solutions. So that's great. If you unpack that index, Singapore is doing well on a trajectory within our economy. But if you unpack the corporate segments, the large companies, the MNCs and our local leading enterprises are doing much better. So they are growing at a clip of about 7 to 8% CAGR in terms of index improvements, becoming digital performers and leaders. That's the good news. And they are on par with the global peer group. If you look at our SMEs, which forms, we have 200,000 SMEs in Singapore. If you look at our SMEs, they are lagging behind. There was an uptick last year, but they're still growing at less than 1%. Global average, 2 to 3%. So our SME segment is lagging on a global basis, and we need to do more. So that's the corporate segment point of view. Our big companies doing great. Small companies, we can do better. Now let's look at the sectors that we have across the economy. In our digital economy, it's not just the tech sector. Every sector is becoming tech. Every worker is becoming tech. If you look at the sectors that are doing well and on par with global averages, they tend to be sectors in Singapore which are finance, insurance, infocom, technology sectors, logistics, transport. These are all globally competitive sectors that need to be competitive and remain relevant. They have been on the journey of digitalization for a long time. They were accelerated through the crisis, and they are coming out well, being prepared for the future. Which are the sectors that are not doing well? Food and beverage, retail, typically domestically oriented sectors which has been sort of shielded from global competition because they operate in our shores. The government has been nudging them, catalyzing them, cheerleading them to adopt various digital solutions to transform. I think the pace was not as good. But I think the crisis gave us an opportunity to accelerate that. So we have put in place programs to drive those outcomes. So that's one big trend. Digitalization has been here. Let's not waste a good crisis. Let's accelerate. And we are putting in place various programs for SMEs in particular, because if you're starting out by adopting digital solutions, we will do that and support you. If you're already a performer as an SME and you want to do better, we'll provide you with a centralized capability called a CTO as a service, so that you can now change your business processes and adopt technologies that will drive fundamental revenue growth for you. And if you're already a leader in your sector, any sector, we want to work with you to bring you to the next level. We are rolling out a digital leaders program, for instance. So hyper-digitalization is a trend. Digitalization is going to be a very strategic focus for us, and we are working very hard with the industry to do so. We are also now orchestrating within IMDA what we call digital utilities, right? Utilities that are going to be rails for any business to operate in a digital economy, be it payments, invoices, trade documents, data sharing platforms, SG TradeX, and many others. So we're trying to see how we can orchestrate that and bring that together so that we can accelerate companies' transformation efforts. Thank you.
Very nice, Kiran. And I know many of my SME leaders listening in will be asking you the next question later. where do we start? How do I rebuild? Lots of goodies on the table, lots of things and programs that come from government. But, I'm a small little SME, 10 to 15 employees, and I really don't know where to start and begin. But before you get to the rebuild side, I'd love to hear from Siu Chu. And Siu Chu, I know your boss is amazing, yeah? Mm-hmm. Terrible to work under such a boss, huh? Yeah. Thank you. Okay.
You're always learning something.
Yes, but visionary, yeah? And I think for many of us in the audience, we will say that DBS has been ahead of the curve in the digitalization. But what has changed in the last 18 months that have speeded things up both for your customers, individuals, as well as corporates? And how has that resonated with you as the head of data, AI, and CTO of the company?
Yes, thanks, Annie. I think the one of the few good things about this pandemic is that actually it has tremendously accelerated the adoption of digital by almost all our client segment, whether it is the mass market or the high net worth people, or actually the SME or the big companies. I think in the past, we have been pushing a lot in this agenda in many countries, in India, Indonesia, as well as in Singapore. But I think that momentum actually cannot match what we have seen in the last 18 months. So I think that is one good thing. And what we have witnessed is actually that the digital adoption is not something that is just limited to any age group. We see actually, the seniors are equally adept at using digital means of interacting with the bank. We also see that the tremendous efficiency that can be gained by the SME, for example, in terms of the adoption of digital payment. So, in the last 18 months, we have seen big growth in terms of all aspects of financial life cycle with our customer, whether it is account opening, it is doing any transaction with the bank, updating any particulars, and managing your finance, whether you are an individual or a company. So that has seen huge exponential growth, and of course, as a result, we have actually had a lot to do within the bank as well to ensure that we have the capacity to cater for all of this explosion. But I think the end result of all of this is, I think we have progressed a lot as a company, as well as with our clients, in terms of making everything efficient for things that has to be done with the bank. And like we say, we want our customers to live more, bank less. The adoption of digital just means that you have more frictionless access to the services from the bank, and you can spend more time living your life rather than handling your banking. That was, I think, the great result that come out from the last 18 months.
Very good. That accounts for all the ATMs that has DBS being closed down. All right. Live more, bank less.
We see the reduction in the leverage of cash as well because of the digital payment. Yeah.
Yes, I'm just teasing you. But before letting you go, between 18 months ago and now, how big is your tech group in terms of number of employees?
Wow, I think that is a great question. Of course, everyone realized that they need to have a lot of tech people to actually digitalize everything, right? And the competition for tech resources has never been greater. I mean, even last year when we look at our recruitment, it was not that difficult to get people. But this year, I think the level of difficulty has actually increased by almost at least 5 to 10 times. So in terms of the workforce, actually, we have increased at least 10% year on year. But I think in terms of effort to reach out to everybody to make sure that we still get the same level of talent and taking into account the fact that borders are closed and everything, I think the effort is huge. But just for information, actually next week I'm organizing a hack to hire out to bring back our usual hackathon, and we have received huge kind of number of applicants for that. And end of next month, I'm organizing a DBS Women in Tech hiring as well. That outreach will start very soon. So I hope for support from all of you here.
And I think that will be part of our rebuild conversation. Okay, so now I'm going to come to you, Jason. In that digital and index that Kiran was mentioning, sorry, you're not in the leading sector. I'm just teasing you. Yeah, 18 months. All right, borders closed. And, what has CAG been doing? Don't laugh. It's a serious question, all right? Because those 18 months are great reset months, right?
Right.
Tell us about it, Jason.
So first, thank you, and privileged to be here. I will say that today I put on the hat as an end user of technology. So, I'm sure the intellectual capacity in this room is really huge. I'm here to learn as an end user of technology because the airport is a large, is a large user of technology to serve our passengers going through. And I hope that all of you in this room probably are all customers that we serve at Changi Airport. I think it's a good time to travel now. Not just because the VTL has been announced a couple of days ago, but what I used to tell our visitors is now you feel more first class than first class. Because what we took in the past, right, 5 minutes to serve, we now have a whole day to serve you. Right. So you might have read in the papers that we have about 3 to 4% of traffic at Changi Airport compared to the pre-COVID traffic volume. So every day we have still have a couple of thousand people taking flights. So yeah, that's keeping us busy. But what is really keeping us busy is because even with fewer passengers, the people on the ground are busier because of all the safe management you have to take care of, information that you need to provide for all the travelers. The good thing is for Changi, before COVID happens, we have already embarked on an automation as well as a robotic journey. So we have all these self-check-in kiosks made available since Terminal 4 opened. But that, on hindsight, was a great move because biosafety became a key focus for all the passengers when COVID hit us. And without all the self-service kiosks, you realize that people are very worried about coming to human contact. So within 2 months, we could make the travelers or the departing journey for every passenger from curbside to boarding contactless. So if you imagine there's no such technology, we didn't move ahead, right, with automation, self-service, it's almost impossible. And even for the self-service kiosk, which is actually, touch surface, we could put in the infrared sensors, they became contactless. You just move your finger close to the screen, and then you can do all these check-in. So I think technology is just, tremendously, a key enabler for us at Changi. So I think, now with the travelers reopened, right, we look forward to serving you, as you come along to the airport to make your next trip. Yeah.
Very nice. Actually, all three of them already covered the theme of why we have the Tech 3 Forum, because the trends, the talent, and the tech have all been covered. But sorry, under my panel, you don't get away with it so easily. The essence is not about resetting. I think resetting, we have all been doing it in this room, outside of this room. I think we need to rebuild. And I think rebuilding also means that you've got to try. And you may fail, but you have to keep trying and keep rebuilding. So I'm going to come to you first, Hichu. You make the statement of bank less, live more. So very good. So we are supposed to do more with less. How come you're still taking so many talent? The rest of the industry are all struggling. No.
Percentage should happen.
So actually we are all in the same boat because a lot of our tech talent, you can only go so far with a little country like Singapore. So can I ask you, how are you rebuilding your, current talent pool? And, talent is supposed to be borderless as well. Are you able to find some of the talent for your projects outside of the country?
Thanks, Annie. I think we have to be very creative to overcome all the barriers that is facing us in terms of where to get the best talent. One of the key things is to be very open in terms of where you get the talent from. So for example, as part of our recruitment, actually we recruited, one example is a lady who was from the construction industry in Singapore. And she wanted to actually reskill herself to be a developer. And she took some course and she came to our hackathon and we hired her. So, people from the construction industry. And of course, the great thing about Singapore government is that Singapore government has many programs to help people to reskill those who want to, the mid-career people who wants to reskill and move into the tech industry. So the TFIT program is a big program that we are supporting, and we have many positions being filled by that pool of people. And of course, within the bank, actually, we are very open-minded as to how we can help the people to transform themselves. So we provided many we call it university. So I have a data university and a cloud university and so on. And as long as you have a will and a desire, we actually provide you with the necessary resources to help you to gain the skill that you may not have. So being very open-minded in terms of where you can tap the talent from, regardless of the experience of the people, is one of the big solution that we have to this problem of scarcity of resources. And I think the great thing that comes out of all of this is that actually when you tap people from different background, actually you have a more diverse group of people, and you ended up with better, more creative solution.
How about the proportion of women? So we have just celebrated the women in tech. How are you reaching out to many of the women to be part of this whole workforce?
Yeah, so I think a few things, as I said, we are very big in actually outreaching to the women community in all our recruitment event, right? So I have a special focus on that. But actually that is not enough. I think, the generation of the awareness amongst all the stakeholders within the company to make sure that they know about their role to bring about a more equal representation is a very key one. So, we put a lot of time to recruit the allies within the bank. Of course, our CEO is a big sponsor and big ally in this agenda, but every single person within the bank, whether it's a man or woman, we want to make sure that they know that they have a role to play, a very important role to play to create a more equal world. So, it is not about not being meritocratic, because I think there was some confusion that if you support a gender diversity agenda, you are not being meritocratic. It's not about that, actually. I think that was one of the things that needs to be demystified. It is about creating a level playing field, because the two genders are different, they have different needs. So that I think is one of the key things that we need to do.
Very good. And I'm looking at my iPad. I don't see the questions coming in. You want to test by asking one or two questions from the audience? All right, start typing in. But actually, I did have some questions that came when people were registering. So we'll come to that in a while. Jason, I need to come to you. So just now you were talking about robotics, AI, IoT, all those good stuff, yeah? Recently, I heard that Ask Jamie got to be taken down. The chatbot wasn't able, all right, to answer the questions coherently. How good are your robots? And how have you been rebuilding them for this new influx of BTL that we're going to be opening up very soon?
Well, that's a difficult question. I always tell people that when you look at robots, you look at AI, you have to come from a perspective whether are you at the user end or you at the owner end, right? So I shared this example with the team earlier. Is how many of y'all have ever been approached by a security officer along the airport, the departure curbside? Because you're trying to drop somebody, you're not supposed to wait for someone, right? And they come chasing you, ask you to move your car. So in the past, this has been a very challenging situation for us because we told the security officer you have to be courteous. It's called a Changi service. And yet, sometimes the drivers will take advantage of that. They don't move the car and then they create a jam. So a couple of months back, we worked with our security partner, Certis, and we put in a security robot. So now we replaced, right, the security officer with a security robot. The problem has disappeared. Why? For the successful implementations of technology, whether it's robotics, AI, it's all about the end user. Now, last time, the human can argue with the security officer. Now, you try, right? See, this is a very interesting human behavior. So a lot of technology that we're looking at the end of the day, the successful implementation depends very much on the user. The robot comes near to the vehicle, first it tells you, I'm taking a picture of your car plate number. Next, I tell you, within the next how many seconds you don't move, right, someone will send you a summon. It's a natural response. So again, in the past, you have these challenges with it. So I say again, the successful user, whether it's Jamie or other chatbots that we've looked at, is all about the end user. And it's also the depth of how complex you want the robotic solutions or the AI solutions to be. So for us, I think we always take small steps, make them highly effective before you go complex. So I think those are the things that we learn. So the robot along the departure curves as an example is the philosophy that we really embarked on as we implement technology. Understand the end in mind, the objective you're hoping to solve, and then put the human equation over it and ask ourselves, how does it interact with the human? And will the human accept the solution that either the robot or the AI is trying to tell you? If you can't get to that point, it's likely to fail. Yeah.
And we will come to that philosophical question in a little while for all my panelists, all right, where we are looking at the AI ethics, all right? But before we get there, I need to get to Kiran first. Don't worry, Kiran, you look nervous already.
With you, I always am.
Just teasing, But actually, I really find that, I'm glad that it's a combination of both human and tech that is coming together, and we are all creating better for a better future. But I'm just wondering, the sectors that you think will not be able to cut it. You want to venture a guess? Or you want to give us some hope for the sectors that don't quite get there yet, but can do something about it?
It's a great question. So Annie is really good. She'll ask you questions that you did not prep for, but okay. Let me talk about where I see a lot of growth, right? If you look at the tech sector, so Jason and I have been looking at this sector for many, many decades now. But if you look at the tech sector today, it is the fastest growing sector in Singapore over the last 2 years, right? There's a lot of growth, but it's not an even growth. There are tech companies that are growing dramatically. Think the big platform companies globally, Amazon, Microsoft, Google. Singapore, think C Group, Grab, and others. Large platform companies. So I think down there, the trend is e-commerce, deliveries, digital experiences, digital services. That will continue to grow dramatically. But within the tech sector, it's not even, right? Certain companies that have been too focused on certain categories, like travel, companies like Expedia or platforms that serve that market for digital services, is not doing too well, right? But if you look at the region, the consumer market for Southeast Asia is growing dramatically. So there'll be more demand for such digital services in logistics, e-commerce, healthcare, transport, education is emergent, gaming is coming up. This is where all the growth will be. But I think in the next bound, the consumer markets are quite well understood, which is why you're seeing a very vibrant tech startup ecosystem in Singapore and around the region, and a lot of capital flowing to B2C type companies. The next wave, because every enterprise now has to digitize at scale, we think that's going to be a $1 trillion opportunity for B2B tech companies, developing products for enterprises like Changi Airport, for DBS, and many others. We are starting to see green shoots over there. You're starting to see companies emerge from our ecosystem like Trax that nobody will know because they do analytics for retail and stuff. You have PatSnap coming up. These are not household names, but we're seeing emergent companies, and I think that's going to be a wave for growth. Now, if I go back to your question of where there will be challenges, I think brick and mortar businesses like retail, F&B will be challenged dramatically, and I think the pace will only accelerate from what we expected before. So I think the question is, how do we A, help some of these companies transform a lot more effectively, or B, look at new business lines, or pivot out of some of these areas. So I think there are a lot of opportunities, but coming back to the biggest challenge, and we can discuss that later, is going to be central to the constraint that we have as an economy is talent, and we can come back to that later. But we are also operating at a time where Singapore as a location for tech companies to grow has never been better. If you look at a pipeline of investments coming in, and you're seeing the headlines, American, Chinese, Southeast Asian companies that are very large are coming into Singapore to expand and not just do headquarters, but do product development, do engineering, do innovation. So that will put added strain on our talent infrastructure, and we need to find innovative ways to move forward.
So, in fact, the question that came in just very timely. All right, so I hold the philosophical question about AI ethics for now. I'm jumping into that big challenge, the elephant in the room that's facing all of us, all rushing after the same pool of young tech talent. So this is a wonderful question. In Singapore, gender inclusion and diversity has progressed. How about ageism inclusion? Not all seniors are the young and highly educated, but they are also our pool of human capital. How are you rebuilding them for recycling and reuse? That one I add in one lah. Okay, okay, because Piyush talked about sustainability, and in ESG, S is a large part.
I can share that from our experience. That there are many people within my team who are, has been with the bank for maybe 35 years, and they actually were the COBOL programmers for the stuff that we have on our mainframe. And years ago, we started this, the agenda to modernize our architecture as well as knowledge. And many of them actually jump into, learning Java, learning data, AI, and whatsoever. So actually, I think ability to learn is nothing to do with age. So, be very open about, as we said, where they come from, what is their age, what's their gender, and so on and so forth. All this should not be a factor. As long as you have a desire to learn, I think, we should provide the opportunity to them.
What about at Changi Airport?
Yeah, I think the challenge is real. And if you talk about for age, I think people know it's always in the media that actually we do have very senior people working at the airport. I mean, it's all inclusive. So they're definitely a key pool of our working community at Changi that we look at very closely during this tech transformation. So one area that we have looked at, if some of you may have seen, we have transformed the cleaning or the facility management of the airport by putting all these cleaning robots. But that doesn't mean that our more senior staff, taking care of the facility management is out of a job. Now, you actually elevate the challenge that they have, the manual part of it. Now you teach them the simpler operation of some of these robotic systems, and they can learn that part, right? So now is how do you use some of these robotic solutions to augment the role that they play. So that's one way to also really overcome the challenge of a shortage of labor in Singapore. So I think it's really finding the fit and which are the area that some of these staff can actually learn the simpler part of tech. I mean, if you tell them to go do C programming, to learn all again, maybe it's not the right thing to do. But to learn how to operate the simple part of it, I think they can very much be part of this transformation. Yeah.
Very good. And for you, Kiran, I think this is very close to your heart. So how do you help the current PMET in tech? All right, they could have graduated with a computer science degree 20 years ago, but everything has changed since then.
So if I had $1 for every time I talk about talent, I'll be a rich man. But no, I think talent is the biggest issue. And look, IMDA and the whole of government through the pandemic set up the National Jobs Council. We have put in place a lot of, together with the unions, together with the employers, put in place tremendous amount of support to keep Singaporeans in the job through the job support scheme that many of you are familiar with. But in a way, that's a stopgap measure and it's not a sustainable one. As we rebuild for the future, I think there are some mindset shifts that we all need to make. Whether it's about PMETs in the job, whether it's mid-careers who have been displaced and how do we bring them in? How do we ensure that some segments of our university kids are doing very well, right? In terms of job outcomes and opportunities. Our polytechnics and ITEs, we can do better. So the shift is that we need to shift away from traditional sources of talent that companies are always used to hiring from. They need to expand that aperture to look at various other sources. Women, elderly, mid-career. ITE, Poly, even someone coming from architecture or other industries that we have had a few examples today. So I think that's one big mindset shift. And we've seen some companies who do that successfully are becoming winners in the war for talent. DBS, NCS, Singtel, and many others, right? The government is stepping forward to put in place tremendous amount of programs to do so, and we are trying to catalyze and nudge that mental model. Over the last 5 years, we saw this trend that technology talent will be needed, not just for the tech sector. That's how we traditionally planned. But now every company needs tech talent. You've heard from DBS, you've heard from CAG, and many others. So how do you plan for that quantity of numbers when our population is declining, right? And the places in ICT courses in our universities and polytechnics over the last 5 years has almost doubled. And even then, it's not going to be enough. So we need to think as a collective ecosystem to solve for this problem, and we need to think out of the box, right? Augmenting the Singapore workforce with top global talent is going to be an important priority for us as well. We need to continue to be diverse, open, and innovative. So I think this is an opportunity for the public sector, the private sector, and the people sector to come together and really think out of the box. Some initiatives that SCS is driving is spot on. The last point I'll make is PMET's already on the job. We've done a lot of place and train programs. We've done a lot of train and place programs. But I think we need to train in place. So we have various short form courses that we support dramatically for PMETs on the job, upskilling themselves. We have done about 78,000 of that over the last 3-4 years. We want to see how we can do more. Singtel, for example, they have many comms networking engineers, but with 5G coming up, instead of looking for fresh talent, they can do that for you. Why not reskill and upskill my current bench so that they can do the next technology layer? So that's how we're trying to work with companies to actually do this at scale.
Very good. Okay, I'll be remiss if I do not talk about ethics, AI ethics. And I think, thank goodness Piyush says it's a philosophical question. So in 5 minutes, we cannot go too much into philosophical question. But quickly, when you are confronted with using AI, what were some of the questions that are in your mind? Any one of you? Xiu-Chu?
I think, firstly, when you are using AI, you need to have a process in place to make sure that you can explain the decision by the AI. And if the data is biased, you need to do something to unbias the data. That will make sure that you don't continue to perpetuate the bias that is in the data.
Okay. Jason?
Yeah, I go back to the philosophical questions about, at the end of the day, it's all about a human. So one of the key consideration here is not just about the ethics, but it's about the personal data and how much are you willing to give up, right? In exchange for convenience, in exchange for values. So this is something that doesn't exist today, but can you imagine one day in clearing the security of an airport, a bot is deciding that how much do we want to check you before you board the aircraft? Now, the thing here is this. In aviation security, it's trying to make sure that no perpetrator gets past the security before he or she boards the plane. Now, what happens if today Xiu-Chu tells me that you are a solid citizen, doesn't jump your bond, your mortgage, right? And has almost no reason to become a perpetrator when you're taking a flight. Do you need to check the person as much when the person is boarding the aircraft? Right? There's always this understanding that if you have no threat or you're not a perpetrator, even if you're carrying something unwholesome, you won't create any damage. But if you are a potential perpetrator, even the smallest device could potentially be a threat. Now, how do we differentiate that? So in future, if you elect to offer, because today if you stand in front of a security officer and say, I'm how good a citizen, I've got no reason to want to be a perpetrator, he or she doesn't believe or know how to make that assessment. But if today there's a longitudinal sets of data that can allow you to do profiling, and say, for example, right, different agencies willing, and you are willing to share that data with them, pre-cleared. then maybe the experience for your travel will be totally different because the risk can be managed. So I think this philosophical question is not about good or evil. At the end of the day, it's the human. How much are you willing to exchange your data, right, for a certain kind of value in return? Yeah.
Not going to ask Kiran because this clock in front of me keeps lighting up already. Okay, and the reason very simple. Jason also need to run. Minister of Transport wants to ask him what he's doing about the airport. Okay. So the last round, all right. Reset, all right, rebuild. I'm going to add one more R. I'm going to call it rebalance. All right, because we will constantly be resetting and rebuilding and rebalancing, and human and AI will all be working together. So I'm going to finish this last round by saying to the virtual audience out there and to our on-site audience, if they are going to be transiting into the pathway forward, what are some of the key takeaways that they should be taking note of? I'm going to start with you, Jason.
Well, I'm not sure whether I'm able to offer insights into what are the new capabilities, but I think the resilience in every human is important. Because today, one biological virus can create a havoc around the world. And we thought we had a solution that's called tech. So everything moved onto tech platforms. What happened if the next virus is the digital one? I was just thinking this morning, we made everybody, went through the ART test in order to come in for this event. You're okay with it. What I tell you to come to today's event, you got to give up your handphone for 1 day. Many of you won't turn up. Right? So if the same happens and says that there's a virus attack and the entire tech system in the world shuts down for whatever reason, for how long, are we able to live with it? Or will the impact be more than the 30 trillion that Piyush was talking about? So I think this is the part that we have to be aware. Getting ready for next virus or the next pandemic, not just the next disease acts, I think in the digital realm is equally important given that how much has shifted over to digital space. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Jason. You see, we didn't have time. If not, the cyber security factor would be part of the conversation.
Fortunately.
Right? Yes, but we will watch for all this. All right, Siu Chu.
So I think the pandemic has taught us to be to be ready for any kind of disruption that we may not have anticipated. And I think the mindset to be able to continuously learn and to have the growth mindset is very important. And I think lastly, as individual or company, the balance is very important. Make sure that we have a sustainable business model and we are responsible people for all segment of the society.
Thank you very much, Siu Chu. Kiran.
I got 5 seconds. So 2 points. One, I think what got us here in terms of strategies, approaches, is not going to get us there. We need to think completely out of the box. I think that's the first point. On many of these issues, talent, sustainability of businesses, etc. I think the second point is really around how do we work together as a collective and not think of ourselves as individuals or companies only. Think as ecosystems, work across in partnership. Because I think by working in partnership, we will get there. So I think I encourage all of us to come together to solve for some of these big, hairy problems that we have, but the opportunities are great. Thank you.
Thank you, Kiran. I take the negative 35, disregard it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, you hear it from here. We are going to reset and rebuild along the way, but to do that, we really need all of you, the collective group of brains in this room and outside of this room. So what I've heard from that last round is, let's go together and build resilience. All right, let's be ready all the time and help each other in that journey. Let's reimagine, regroup, and come together for a better future. Thank you very much. You've been a wonderful audience, and let's put our hand together and thank this great panel. Thank you very much.